evening, we're incredibly fortunate to hear from two dynamic leaders in our field. Donna Morris, Chief Human Resources Officer at Adobe, will be our keynote speaker this evening. And following Donna's address, she'll be joined by Melissa Daimler, a member of our MSOD Advisory Board, who will engage Donna in some conversation about the future of work and her important work at the helm of HR at Adobe. Melissa Daimler has been an executive at high-growth companies like Adobe, Twitter, and WeWork for over 20 years. She now works as an advisor, coach, and consultant to companies at various growth stages. Her primary focus is helping leaders define and operationalize culture. She credits Adobe for helping her learn how HR can be a key lever and partner to the business. Melissa has a Master's of Organizational Development from Pepperdine and is currently sitting on the advisory board for University of San Francisco for our MSOD program. Donna Morris holds a Bachelor in Political Science from Carleton University, and her north of the border accent gives her away as a native of Ottawa, Canada. From abolishing Adobe's annual performance reviews to dramatically expanding its family leave policy, and most recently, achieving global gender pay parity across all 32 countries where Adobe has employees, Donna has set the industry agenda, making Adobe a great place to work. Donna believes that people strategies empower successful business outcomes, and with Adobe being an IP-based company, people are its most important asset. In her role as Chief Human Resources Officer and Executive Vice President of Employee Experience, she leads all aspects of human resources, real estate, and security operations globally. Under her leadership, the Adobe workforce has increased by 226% to more than 20,000 employees, and its real estate facilities presence has grown to more than 75 locations around the globe.
It's not a typical Friday night that you're probably here, or, well, certainly you're not here, but you're probably not usually assembled with a bunch of people who are focused on a profession that clearly I'm very passionate about, and that's the fusion, I'll call it, between business and people. So I'm glad that some people are toasting. I must say I'm going a little dry tonight, but I am somewhat envious, and I would encourage any of you to enjoy as whatever beverages that you have, and hopefully we'll make this insightful for all of you. What you saw there was a little bit of an insight in terms of Adobe. We've been in business for more than 36 years, and virtually you don't pick up a magazine, watch television, see a movie, go online shopping, or frankly just surf the web without seeing content that's being created by Adobe, or frankly not being targeted by Adobe. If you've seen an item you were looking for to perhaps wear out this evening, and all of a sudden it showed back up again in one of your social feeds, it's likely you were being targeted, and I have to admit, you're likely being targeted by Adobe technology. We have two key business areas. One is all around enabling creativity for everyone, and the other is around enabling businesses be creative to all of their end customers. And that's what we do. And so what I want to do is share with you a little bit about Adobe, but then, hello Elizabeth, one of my team members. And then I want to share more in terms of just the role of HR, and then specifically, I know many of you have studied here at USF, which is actually just a beautiful campus. So I have to say this is the first time that I've been on the campus. It's gorgeous. And talk a little bit about the changing nature of HR, at least from our lens at Adobe. And then it's exciting to have the opportunity to be in discussion with Melissa Daimler, who has given back to USF and the master's program here, but was a privilege to actually work with Melissa for quite a period of time at Adobe too. So what does Adobe do? Overall, our goal is to change the world through digital experiences, and it's interesting, I've been at Adobe for 17 years, and frankly, for all of those 17 years, we were talking about changing the world through digital experiences. But the reality is that 17 years ago when I started, digital experiences were really something that people weren't really talking about. While the internet was a thing, we didn't actually consume content the way we do today. I mean, today I'm surprised many of you are not already on your devices. If you are, you might be, taking a video or taking pictures. But the reality is we are inundated with content and we're inundated with information, and all of us interact with that daily in our personal lives and in our professional lives. And I should say I've got a wonderful Vanna, but her name is Erin, who's hiding behind clicking for me. So thank you, Erin. As was referenced today, we're around 22,000 employees. We operate in over 38 countries, give or take changes. We are an IP-based business, so we pride ourselves that people are our most important asset. That's why we call out the number of patents. We have over 4,500 patents. At any point in time, we celebrate individuals that receive patents. In fact, this week we had our employee meeting. One of our employees has been with us for 16 years, just received his 100th patent while working at Adobe. It's really critical to us because from our perspective, you can't call yourself a technology company if you don't actually have the asset of intellectual property. There's a lot of companies that are, framing themselves as technology, but really what that is just a way to say that they're current. And I would perhaps profess that every company has become a digital company, but not all companies are technology companies. Thank you, Erin. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the evolution of, or the role of human resources from the lens that all of you, and maybe I'll step back. How many of you are actually practitioners in, whether you call it a specialty such as organizational development or learning and development, or more of a generalist role in human resources, employee experience, people success? How many of you are practitioners? So a good number, and I think stepping back, I've actually was just thinking of this evening. I graduated from university in 1989. So to date myself, you can do the math on what perhaps cohort I land in. The reality is I've been working in human resources for 30 years, and it has changed dramatically. When I started in human resources, it was called HR. I know some people probably started at that point in time, and it was personnel. So fortunately, where I was, it was human resources. But I think the point that I would really make is there's never been a time that has been as acute as we're in right now around the inflection of business and people, the conduct within organizations, the importance in terms of leadership, the importance in terms of inclusion, the reality that you don't get inclusion unless you really have an organization that's diverse, and it's diverse from all perspectives. And if you think of the rate of change that happens today across every industry, the catalyst to those changes, they only actually happen if you have the right people and the right leaders. And it all starts with really having a strategic plan. And all of that and all of those areas are a result of really the profession. And I think each one of us should be very, very proud that you have the opportunity to be not only an architect, but a builder at the same point in time. And that's the way I think of the function, is you're the organizational architect and you're the enabler of those outcomes, so those building of the outcomes. And what you see here is the way we've taken the function within Adobe and evolved it as our business has evolved. When I started at Adobe in 2002, we were 3,200 employees. We were 1.2 billion in revenue. We were primarily a box software company that had assets to do with creating content and then documents. And over the last many years, we've changed our business to actually incorporate an enterprise motion around digital transformation for businesses. And at the same point in time, one of the biggest catalysts has been how we've thought of our organization and our people. And so what you see here is really just the evolution of human resources. And then if you think of people, you have to think about where they work globally and how you want to grow. and that was the infusion of people and places, which was bringing human resources and real estate all together. Then I had a number of years, 3 years, where I ran customer experience and employee experience, and that's because as an organization we needed to drive cultural change around the customers, so we put the organizations together so that we could use the mechanisms that we had within human resources, such as reward mechanisms, such as change mechanisms, and leverage those from a customer perspective. And then I'll call it being back home again now, where I'm focused exclusively on employee experience. And the backdrop to all of that is really that the world is changing. And the way we look at the changing workplace is probably and paramount to many of you. Hopefully this all resonates, but we're living in a period of time that really is all around the skills economy. And there are different needs that we're all seeing within our workplaces. There's the requirement to build learning agility across our overall teams and our organizations for individuals to really take on the opportunity themselves to learn and to grow. Emerging technologies, the advancement of AI, big data, machine learning. I know that there's lots of buzz often on which jobs will disappear, and the reality is jobs are disappearing and jobs will disappear. But what we would contend would be that human empathy and creativity is not something that the machine can replace. And when you think about empathy or you think about creativity, those are attributes that often can be nurtured by the function for which we're all part of. Diversity and inclusion, I mentioned this. There's not a week that goes by that you don't either see the highlights of diversity and inclusion or the lowlights. Not to be political, but my own birth country of Canada, probably a number of weeks ago, I might have been proud in terms of the movements that were made in Canada specific to diversity and inclusion. Tonight I feel embarrassed, actually, relative to what has transpired, I don't mean to be political relative to that, but the fact of the matter is we're living in a time where everybody has to step back and be transparent about their behaviors and ensure that they're actually setting up, whether it be in their organization or their entity, an environment of trust and an environment truly of inclusion. And I think it's super important. And it's not only important for all of us, but it's very, very important for generations that have only grown up in diverse settings. How many of you are parents? So a lot. I would contend that many of us, and at least here in the Bay Area, we're fortunate in so many ways. We're fortunate in the sense that there is robust diversity in terms of ethnic diversity and diversity of thought. I'd say it's sad, and particularly here in San Francisco, that we have such diversity in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds. But the reality is that our children that are growing up in this environment are used to more diverse settings than perhaps their peers are that are growing up in other parts of the world or other parts of our country. And I think that that's a benefit that they have from growing up in those environments. Purpose-driven culture. How many people saw the outcomes of the Business Roundtable that was just earlier this month? Top overall institutional shareholders, whether it's BlackRock, whether it's Vanguard, there's an expectation now for purpose within organizations. It's not good enough to just deliver financial results. There's an expectation that those overall organizations will do good for all of the constituents, not just the customers, not just the shareholders, clearly the employees and the partners. And the role that helps to influence that is our overall function, right? The overall function of human resources. And then at the end of the day, the future of work. How is work really done? How do people really collaborate? How do you leverage technologies? How do you think of more virtual organizations? Are organizations really going virtual or are they not? I think all of those are aspects for which all of us are responsible for driving. And, I would hope if there were any messages that I would leave to all of you is this is what sort of gets me up and going on a regular basis, is the fact that we actually have a very big landscape or a very big canvas by which we can actually paint the impact on an organization. And if the impact of that painting results in your workplace being considered first and foremost by your own employees as a place that they want to give their hearts and minds, and then collectively that culminates into recognition for your company as having a strong brand, then I think that that's a wonderful report card for each of us as individuals, because ultimately it's around driving business success, and the only way you can do that is through people. When we talk of Adobe, and I should call out one of our founders, Chuck Getschke, who does not have the glasses in this picture. So John Warnock and Chuck Getschke are our founders, but Chuck is actually a very friendly individual as it relates to USF. He's been a great donor here. And both of them set Adobe up with the focus that they really wanted to only hire people that would do good work and would be good individuals. And they nurtured that, and as we grew, it became important to actually capture the essence of those values so that we could leverage those as we grew and we scaled. And actually, Melissa did a lot of this work when she was with us at Adobe. We went through a brand exercise and we came out with these 4 values that have now stood the test of time. And in fact, the biggest award that one can be granted at the company is called the Founders Award. And that goes to 12 individuals that are peer nominated that live the values. And the message that I would send to you, as many of you practitioners of organizational development, my belief is culture changes. And in fact, if a company does not prepare to change its culture on an ongoing basis, it won't be able to survive or thrive. But what actually is an opportunity is to have values that will actually stand the test of time. So if Adobe was a person, it has 4 core values, and those stand the test of time. They've been with us, and hopefully they'll be with us for the next decades ahead. But what will be different is the business climate, the people, the size of our organization, and we'll all end up actually sharing those values as a continuity or a thread, if you will, in terms of how the organization exists. And what I would love to do, and I think that was all really I had formally to share, is to use it as an opportunity to get into discussion with Melissa and open it up to all of you.
So I have a little story about Donna, and this is, I think you've heard this story.
Sure.
It's always daunting when people say that. When I first met Donna, Adobe was acquiring Excelio, and Donna was the head of HR at the time. And we were super excited to meet her. We had heard all of these amazing things. And the HR business partners were gathering in a room, and Donna was going to come in, and we were prepared to sit through yet another PowerPoint deck on this function, the HR function, and thought, you would go over the org structure and the values and the philosophy and just a little bit about HR. So Donna comes in and launches with a whole kind of overview of the strategy of Excelio, the revenue, who the customers are, what the market was like, the value opportunity to come together with Adobe. And we were just blown away at how much knowledge you had about the business. And it was a career-defining moment for me in really shifting how we think as HR and OD professionals, and that it has to be that business first mindset. And it has driven how I think about this work for my entire career. So it wasn't a bad story.
Thank you. That's really nice. It's always like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
What story might come out?
Yeah, it wasn't one of those other stories, but later. And so and that is a hallmark, I think, of your leadership style. You've always talked about the business first, and not just, we have to align with a business, but actually HR is part of the business, and that has I think come up in everything you've done, and I want to start there. And you talked, I loved the evolution that you put up here on the slide, and kind of shifting HR just in how we've gone from personnel, I can't believe we ever had that word, but compliance oriented, very reactive, very process focused, to more of a service and solutions orientation. And in order for us to continue to evolve, we continue to need to be agile and scale, and some of the other skills that you talked about around creativity and empathy. Would love to just start there around, kind of what do you see are the key skills for us to continue to build as HR and OD professionals?
So first, thank you, Melissa. I think that is, I appreciate that story and that setup. I would say that to be effective in influencing organizational outcomes, there's no way you can do that if you really don't understand the business. And, clearly I've been at Adobe for a long time, so a benefit I have is I cringe, frankly, when people say a seat at the table. I find it disrespectful to the function because I've only ever reported to a CEO. When I worked at the small company, Excelio, I worked for a CEO. When I came and joined Adobe, I was not in the top job. It was very deliberate. I had worked at a small software company. We were $100 million in revenue, 700 employees. And so, for some of you at different points in your career, sometimes you have to take a step down to take steps back up. And I had no problem going from being VP of HR in a small company to being senior director in a big company. So that's just a little bit of a sideline too, is I think we live in a world where everybody only wants to mount up, and going up in the wrong company is actually taking a big step down, in my opinion. But in terms of business, even if I think of working, and that was the acquisition coming in from Excelio, is really understanding whatever that business is, I think allows you to do your best work. And, reflecting, I actually have not worked for too many companies. I worked for a municipality, so that's a very service-oriented business. I worked for the biggest communication and media company in Canada called Rogers. It's sort of like the Comcast of the US. I worked for another software company called Fulcrum, and then I worked for Excelio, and then I'm working, of course, at Adobe. And so perhaps over 30 years, being fortunate that I have really only made a number of stops, and this last one for quite a period of time has allowed me to go really, really deep. But I often think of, geez, if I was going somewhere else, what would be top of mind? And the guidance I'd give to all of you is you cannot influence outcomes unless you really understand the business for which you're trying to influence those outcomes. So to skills, I actually think it's more important to have a business background than anything. If I look at my own background, I always say I grew up in a different point in time, which I did. And so great, took political science, and I have, effective, hopefully, communication skills. But that's not the world that we're living in at this point in time. And so I always encourage younger people who might be pursuing education, if they're interested in our field, to actually start right in their undergrad to take business. And I suggest that because unless you have a solid foundation of understanding economics, accounting, organizational behavior, management principles, I think you're at a deficit. And I will do a little plug for Canada in that if you actually want to be in HR, you have to have certification. And so while I did my undergraduate, right away out of school, I ended up having to go back and taking community college courses because I hadn't taken accounting. I had taken lots of economics, but I didn't do accounting, and I had not done organizational behavior, and I had to do that to get my designation. And so, that's something that I frankly, I was on the SHRM board here in the US for a few years, and I was hoping to influence more of that outcome, but long rat hole. I think you have to learn the business, and I think the more you learn the business, then you're able to influence outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's a great piece of advice. I think the other thing that I learned from you at Adobe is being a generalist matters. And I think you can learn a lot about the business working with a number of different leaders. I think I talk to so many OD professionals, learning and development professionals who just want to do that. They just want to go in that function.
I think it's very hard, frankly, to know how to influence either learning mechanisms or talent management programs unless you really understand the organization. And then second, really understand jobs. Because if you don't understand jobs from the context of what skills and capabilities are required, I think it's really challenging to identify what programs or processes you need to put into place. So I would say try to be a navigator of getting as many experiences, even if they're experiences that are project-oriented, like it's your annual review time or your reward cycle. Go and partner on that so you learn more about compensation, because compensation is tied to jobs, and then you learn more about the jobs. Or take some opportunity to do interviewing for different jobs so that you really understand jobs.
That's great. Great advice. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit. So you are at the forefront, I think, in terms of HR leadership and innovative initiatives and programs. I think Adobe was one of the first companies who got rid of ratings. And, you know, a lot of us are talking about always-on feedback and what does that look like? And I think you guys have done it now for, I mean, it's at least been
Since 2012, yes.
Yeah, so it's been a while. Gender pay parity, LGBTQ, you just had the Adobe for All Summit last week. And so there's just a lot of innovation. So even though you've been there 17 years, I think it's amazing that you're continuing to kind of, you said it earlier, go deep and figure out how to think about this function differently and how it can, you know, help the business even more. So I think the question is about, you know, as we all think about doing those kinds of changes and initiatives, what should we be thinking about? Like and those are all different, I realize, but how do you go about the business case for kind of rolling something out?
Well, I think it takes a team, right? So I want to start by saying I think I have an incredible team and have had incredible team members over different periods of time. But I guess stepping back, a lot of the, I'll call it ideation, what gets me excited about continuing to do the work that we do is that you always, or at least what I have found is, so often people in our role have really great intuition that something isn't right. And we know that it's not right with either the organizational structure or the processes or something to do with people. And I think often people find themselves somewhat paralyzed by what I do next. And maybe I'm more the type that just sort of sees it the way I, or say it the way I see it. And look at that as sort of the challenge. So whatever your challenge is actually becomes the opportunity, and then it turns into how you actually influence the outcome. And, simply put, the benefit of being somewhere for a period of time where you have a track record is I actually no longer have to really ask for permission. I probably beg for forgiveness more often than not. And so that's a different point. For people, though, that need to build the business case, it does start with a business case. So I'll use ratings and rankings. I fundamentally believe, at least in our organization, different for others, but in our organization, we were very team dependent. And so to be team dependent, but then we're going to take that same team and we're going to rate them and we're going to rank them against each other, I think is soul crushing. And I don't think it fosters team success because everybody is an individual. And so using that as an example, if I was someone who was giving coaching to an individual that was considering making that change, it's, well, what's the business outcome? Business outcome is if everybody's not actually performing at his or her best or their best, they will not actually accomplish what you need to. So I think everything should come with the lens of the business. Same with if I look at gender pay parity. First off, I don't understand why anyone would think it's acceptable to pay people different based on ethnicity or gender. I don't understand it. So I think it does go down to process. So back to then you have to really identify and understand jobs and understand what you're really evaluating. But once you do that, then if you don't pay people, first off, you open yourself up to a lawsuit. So, people can certainly look at that. But you should look at it in terms of your inability to either attract or retain the talent you need. So I think there's not really a process that the function drives that we can't think of a business reason or rationale for not making change to it. For the better. Right? For the better. I'll use the example of parental leave. Yes, it costs a lot more to perhaps extend a benefit to employees to take, ample time to be with their new child, whether it's adopted or a birth child, does not matter. But I will tell you, our statistics now say that as opposed to 30% of the individuals leaving because they're not able to integrate work and life, only 5% leave. It's a dramatic difference. And so to say that that's not a valuable reason to actually look at implementing a benefit, on the flip side, that's that many more opportunities for people to grow and develop and have an intern opportunity to act in a role. So I think there's lots of opportunity.
I think the other thing I learned from you and at Adobe is when you were rolling out a lot of these big initiatives, you knew that possibly we weren't getting it right the first time. So it goes back to Agile, and there was a lot of iteration. And so a lot of what the press hears or a lot of what we hear at the end isn't how it started. And so I love that it was okay to just do version 1, but continue to iterate as you went along, and you actually encourage that. And so I think that's just something important for us to remember.
I think sort of in your older state, which I am now, so I call it the earn and the return state, right? So at some point in time, it's like, okay, it's more about returning insights to others, but I would say that the more you communicate and the more you're receptive to feedback on things that need to change, the more empowered everybody feels that they can be in bringing forward suggestions, right? Because it cultivates that environment.
Absolutely. Okay, great. I love the values. I love that there are only 4 that I can remember. And I love a quick story about how these were created. And they're 10 years old now, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. What I love about them is I think the branding team was doing some work with Adobe customers, and at the same time, we internally were doing quite a bit of what you do when you do create new values, focus groups, and talking to leaders and figuring it all out. And the branding team came back and showed these to us, and it was that aha moment of, oh my God, it's the similar thing we're hearing from employees, and wouldn't it be great if Given Authentic is in there, that what people experience on the outside is what people experience on the inside. And it was just this great moment coming together. And so I love that you talk a lot about the customer experience, the employee experience, and making sure that what people see on the outside is what people experience on the inside. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how you've taken those values and integrated them into a lot of the people processes. So how you hire and how you develop and how you recognize people.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually I'll use a non-Adobe example because sometimes I'm sure people out there might be thinking, oh my goodness, we're only going to talk about Adobe. So I actually sit on a board of directors of a semiconductor company. And yesterday and today was our quarterly board meeting. And they've gone through phenomenal transformation as an organization. And we've been talking about their values. And same essence, we've been saying, what do we think the attributes are that reflect who we are at our best internally, and then who we are at our best externally to our end customer. And with the goal being that if we can identify what those attributes are, how can we use those to hire based on them, develop based on those, consider in terms of promotion, consider in terms of building leadership capability. So the same essence of what we've done at Adobe. And I think what many have done, in fact, our CEO is the independent chair of the board of Pfizer. And Pfizer just went through a very big CEO change. And with that, he was sharing, now they've got a new vision. They've been working on their values. They're going to use their values internally and externally. And I think it's powerful to think about values differently from the vantage point of, if the organization was a living mechanism, what really are the attributes that are key? And they can be aspirational, but how do they actually provide the foundation for people to understand what is expected of behaviors or outcomes within an organization?
Speaking my language. Absolutely, thank you. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to just ask you quickly, this is a big question, but what do you consider is your biggest accomplishment, and what do you consider is your biggest learning moment so far?
Well, I think definitely biggest accomplishment has been just being a member of an incredible team. And, I say that at a macro level. Adobe has been on a fantastic growth trajectory over the last number of years. In fact, since 2013, we've doubled in revenue, we've doubled in terms of the size of the population, and frankly, to have the privilege to work with the CEO that I work with and to work with the team that I've had the chance to work with is definitely what I view as sort of the macro key accomplishment, because it's allowed so many other changes to transpire. So that would be the big there's definite programs like pay parity and check-in, which is our approach to managing performance outcomes. But I think it's being part of a team that's driven a lot of change and a lot of growth that, frankly, has benefited the shareholders, it's benefited our employees and our customers. On what I've learned the most, I would say some of the same things. I've learned so much during change, and I've learned more in the bad times than in the good times. I think a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And right now, we're living in a period of time where the employment market is pretty frothy. And rightly or wrongly, I think that builds entitlement. I do not like entitlement. I think it works against trying to build a really great organization. And I think what I've learned along the way is that you have to set up your organization to work in good times and bad times, and you can't reflect or you can't behave differently in either of those. Meaning, when the market is really, really hot, you can't behave different as an organization towards your people than you would if times were not hot. Are you changing your practices just to react to different outcomes, or is that the way you want to operate? So I guess a little bit general, a little bit vague. On the check-in, I'll look back and say I move quickly. There's times that, I have to coach myself to go slow, to go fast. It was career limiting. The first group that I talked about changing the performance review is actually a reporter that chose to put it on a front page, and I hadn't even talked to my boss about it. So, it's sort of urban legend
Forcing
now.
function.
But I look back and say, wow, that was probably not very good to do. So I've learned a lot along the way, but I wouldn't change any of the outcomes.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time, but just quickly, when I was there, not to bring it down, but in some of the hard times, we had a couple of layoffs, it hasn't.
I have had my share of layoffs.
Those were
yes.
some of them, the people still to this day talk about those in a way that I've never heard anybody talk about a layoff. You were so respectful and the package that I got, and just, so I agree. I think Adobe and just how it works and how it treats employees is there in the good and the bad.
Yeah,
it's great.
I think ultimately back to our profession as a whole, I think if there was an attribute that I would want to be most admired for, it would be approachability, and the fact that ultimately I was contributing towards great outcomes for the business and for people. And I think if all of us focus on treating people with respect, then that speaks volumes about the companies that we work for.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. I think we're coming. I'm getting the cut.
Thank you.
But just thanks for inspiring us. Thanks for continuing to push the needle in this field. And I continue to be inspired. And I'm so proud to be an alum of Adobe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. It's now my pleasure to present our inaugural USF MSOD Distinguished Alumni Award. This award is being presented to honor an alumni for contributions to the community, to the university, and to the MSOD program, as well as to the OD profession. This evening, we are pleased to present this award to Linda Hotham, who exemplifies the spirit of this award in every way. Linda received her BA in Political Science from the Middlebury Institute in Monterey, California, and she has a certificate in Hispanic Studies from the University of Barcelona, and she has an MHROD degree from the University of San Francisco. In 1987, Linda and her late husband, Ronald Hotham, started PACAM, a third-party logistics company that operated the Oakland Foreign Trade Zone. Following Ron's death, Linda took over the helm of both the logistics and real estate companies. In 2008, after 21 years of running PACAM, it was sold to Matson Global Distribution Services, a division of Matson Navigation. Linda still controls and manages its real estate properties as CEO of Pacific American Group. Linda has won numerous Bay Area business awards, including the 2009 San Francisco Business Times Most Influential Women in Business. And a bit closer to home, Linda currently serves as a member of the School of Management Dean's Circle and has established the USF Women's Advancement Scholarship, which provides scholarships for women in graduate programs within the School of Management. Regarding this scholarship, Linda has noted, "I have dreams that a recipient of my scholarship will go on to do great things and become a future scholarship donor. Pay it forward," she says. Now, please take a moment and enjoy a video honoring Linda Hotham.
In 1995, I decided to come to USF to study organizational development because we had at that time a logistics company and there were around 250 employees. And I realized that harnessing the power and the energy of those employees was of utmost importance to our success. In 1996, my husband died, and I needed to reorganize our companies and get my bearings, raising two boys, 6 and 7. And so I took a leave of absence, and the school, of course, was very gracious and understanding. In 2003, I came back to finish and graduated a year later. I think it's been part of my success. It's been a reason why our companies have been successful. And so that success has translated back to USF in the way of setting up scholarships and being able to dedicate time to the Dean's Circle or just being a good alumni.
The Hotham Scholarship has really helped me. When I applied to go back to school, I'm an older student, and when I applied I was really wondering why I was doing this. And when I got the scholarship, it gave me confidence. It made me realize that people believed in me and felt I still had something to contribute.
I'd really like to express my gratitude. I'd like to tell her thank you for continuing to support the MSOD program and for women scholars specifically.
It's moments like this when you stop and pause and look back and give gratitude for all those who helped you along your path, and certainly USF helped me along mine.
Linda is unfortunately unable to be with us this evening, and we're delighted to have her son, Aaron Hotham, join us and accept this award on Linda's behalf.
Just put this on the table. Hello, I'm Aaron Hodem. It's an honor and privilege to accept this award on my mom's behalf. Today, she just hiked 25 miles at the El Camino de Santiago at the St. James Pilgrimage in Spain. For those of you who know Linda, you know she likes to push her mind, body, and soul to the limit. Whether it's water skiing, or hiking, or running a business, she's always on the run. As you guys heard earlier in the video, my father passed away in 1996. This terrible accident left my mom a widow, a single mother of two, and a brand new CEO, all while being shell-shocked by the untimely death of my father. During this tragic times, the wolves are clawing at the door, foaming at the mouth, knowing that feeding time is pretty much near. What they didn't know is that little Miss Red Riding Hood had other plans. Linda was ready to fight tooth and nail for the memory of her husband, and thus providing a future for my brother and I. Which leads me to why I'm here today. With her back up against the wall as a new CEO, Irish twins, she quickly had to realize that she had to better her education in some way. As Charles Darwin once said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that's most adaptable to change that survives. So while working full-time in Oakland, she managed to take night classes and was able to obtain her master's in organizational development in 2003 from here at USF. As impressive as that might sound, she would still take the time to make all my high school basketball games, which is probably a testament of why she's such a crazy driver. But if it wasn't for the same kind of drive, my brother Chris and I would have lived way different lives. And I truly believe that USF plays a large part in not just her development in business, but who she is as a person, and this had a trickle-down effect on my brother and I. After seeing my mom do what she has done throughout her life, it's given me the strength to follow and pursue my own passions. In 2006, I graduated from Le Cordon Bleu in San Francisco in the culinary arts, backed and supported by my family. And at the end of this year, I will be opening up my own restaurant called Jerry's Delicatessen. Thank you. We are also currently booking some catering, so if you need some catering, come talk to me, all right? I'll give you guys a smoking deal. All right, barbecue plug, check. But on a more serious note, I remember being a freshman in high school in 2003 and being so proud of my mom for graduating back then. So to stand here before you today accepting this award on her behalf is truly, incredibly inspirational and very humbling at the exact same time. There's no bigger fans in this world of my mom than my brother and I, maybe my grandma Babs. Hey, Grandma. Thank you, USF, and for everything you've done for me, my family, and my mother. And go Dons.
At the conclusion of our anniversary celebration, I'd like to take a moment to thank everybody who's made this evening possible tonight. A special thanks to Donna Morris and Ms. Melissa Daimler for an inspiring look into the practice of OD at Adobe and an engaging conversation about the future of our profession. Thank you to the fantastic MSOD Advisory Board for their tireless contributions and their support of the program. A huge debt of gratitude is owed to our fantastic alumni and external relations team, Danielle Glenn, Susan Evans, and Michelle Owen. Thank you. And thank you to my outstanding faculty colleagues and our bright, energetic students who make this program what it is today, and and for our alums who are such excellent ambassadors of this program. Thank you all for joining us tonight and being part of the celebration. And finally, I'd like to express my gratitude to our School of Management leadership for their tremendous support of the program. And to conclude our program, please welcome Dr. Charles Moses, Dean of the School of Management.
Very excited to be here. I think you all get the energy in the room. This is important work, and I want to commend the program on its 40th anniversary, but more importantly, this is driven by faculty champions, and so we have some great champions. If you're one of those people, you know who you are, please stand and be acknowledged. Doesn't happen without you. Rebecca, Jennifer, Richard. Okay. Okay. So all this talk about artificial intelligence and driverless cars. I remember my first job back in New York. It was about personnel. It was real simple. Count the people. Count the people. It's a lot more complex now, right? But the requirement, okay, what we ask people to do now is to give their best selves. We live in a knowledge economy. And so in order to get that, in order to get their best selves, you need people to be totally engaged. And I think that's what Donna was talking about. Understand the business and how to get the best out of people. That's what we focus on here at USF. It's important. We commit ourselves to bringing you the very, very best in terms of practices in the field, and we're very happy to say that we think we're producing some pretty effective leaders. I think we have 2 tables of alums here. Are the alums here? Okay. All right. And since I'm a member of a minority group, I think it's also important for me to say that diversity and inclusion are very, very important. But let me just tell you how I define it. It's not just about hiring a person of color or a woman or someone who's not necessarily from the mainstream, but it's also about using their best ideas. I think our country is made better when we have a range of ideas that can bubble to the surface. We used to have something in America called the glass ceiling. Familiar with that? Yeah. And it's like a limit on you because you were maybe a woman or a person of color or some other distinction. Okay? So the glass ceiling is being broken, and I think that's a good thing. Okay? But we're also, I think of diversity in terms of diversity of ideas. We need a range of people, a range of ideas in order to be our best selves in America. We're facing some important corporate challenges, organizational challenges. We're facing some important challenges as a people as well, as a nation, and we need new ideas. I don't know about you, and I don't want to be political, but I've been watching some of the political discourse in our country. How many people here think we're getting the best? I don't see any hands raised. So you and I are on the same page. So I think in terms of diversity of leadership styles, but also one more thing, we need committed people. And this allows me to talk a little bit about USF. USF has a value system, we call it curia personis, whole person. And those of you who are students here know what I'm talking about. We place a value on not just going to school and not just making money, but also doing good. And I think that's something that is in short shrift in our country. We need more of it. So I want to thank you for coming tonight. They saved me until last, and I guess for good reason. I'm the one that pays the bills. Okay. But they're the ones who do the good work. So I want to thank you all for coming. I also want to acknowledge Linda's family, a lovely mom, for being here. We've been blessed in this community with really, really committed, energetic people who are doing really wonderful things, our students, our faculty, and the folks who pulled this event off for us tonight. So I want to thank you all and wish you a good evening.